Hello, this is Athena Jezik, and today I'm going to be working on Melissa. Some of you may know her from the other videos that she's made. She has a shoulder issue, so I'm going to show you a little bit about the shoulder issue being tied into some of the subtle work that's provided in the course. So I'm going to start out by looking at the neck and in relationship to the rest of the body and the shoulders and the level of the shoulders, which is something that you want to check when there's a shoulder problem. It's oftentimes dealing into the neck or into the back or shoulders, but it's different. Shoulders are very difficult to work on because they move in so many different directions and they tie into so many different places into the anatomy. So it's a trickier point to be working with, but it can be done, especially if you know how to do the subtle anatomy work. So first of all, what I'm seeing here with Melissa is that the neck is out of alignment. The chin, as you draw down on the chin, you see that it's over to the side. It's not center where it should be here. It's over to the side. So the head should actually be more like this. That pulling over to the side shows that there's something going on in the neck as well as the shoulder. So I'm going to just check the neck, behind the neck, and see what that curtails. There's something going on right on the left side next to the vertebrae. It's the muscle is a little crepitus in a way. I guess that's the best way to tell you what it feels like. And it does feel like the bone is slightly, let me check that. You want to check the bones. So what I'm doing here is I'm checking the alignment of the bones. This neck actually has some issues going on. Here's the bone. That feels pretty much of in alignment, but there's a little bit of, feels like there's a little bit of a torque happening. And then the base of the skull. So I think the best way to start out with this would be to do a cranial base release. That's the way we can get the neck muscles nice and loosened up. So we'll just hold that up and let that release in the base of the skull. That will open up the neck a little better, and then we can get down into some of the shoulder muscles. That's good. And she's doing real good and letting go, tuning in with the body, and that straightened up that chin a little bit, that quite a bit actually. Just releasing that tension right there at the base of the skull. So it's probably not as related into the vertebrae as there's probably more muscular pull. That's on her left side, so I don't know exactly what kind of maybe repetitive or motion that she does on the left. And there's some crepitus along here. The crepitus is that feeling that you get that's kind of crunchy. So that's there. And then checking along here, along the trapezius and the levator muscle, which all feels pretty good. So I, just from assessing this much, it does feel like there's a bit of work that she's been doing with herself, taking care of that. So that's all good, because that the more a person takes care of their physical body, the easier it is for these sort of things to be worked out. Okay, so there's that. And then again, I'm going to put a little bit of oil on, and this is the hemp oil, which I have been telling you about. So you can check in the description box below if you're interested to explore this further. And I'm going to put this on the upper shoulder, and her shoulder is hurting more in the ball right through here. So I'm doing both sides to just see where the difference is. If one side is good and the other side isn't, you can tell what's happening in the muscle when you go over each side, because it won't be feeling quite the same. There's a little bit of tension on the left side up through this area, but on the left, this side is much more relaxed. Yeah, this side is much more relaxed. The right side is much more relaxed than the left. So there's something going on there with probably the trapezius and levator muscle. But again, there's so much that is involved in the shoulders that sometimes it takes a bit of investigation to really find it and know what's happening. And then of course we want to drain a little bit of the fluid out of the area to make sure that that's not going to be hindering any of the muscles, so we don't have a lot of fluid around something. If there's any kind of inflammation, even a small amount, there will be more fluid in the area. So just to open up just the very basic part of the lymphatic system. And that is a technique that will be taught also in the course. Okay, wow. All right, so it feels the roughest right along here, and I'm going to slide myself around. Okay, so now that I've pulled around to the side, and right along here is where I feel a little bit of roughness. Right along, it's the socket, and there's some muscles across here. And then it goes, this is very rough through here. Really rough, yeah. I can see where this is going to be a little bit of a painful thing. And I need to use a little bit more oil because I'm having to go a little bit deeper than just subtle. Okay, so I'm going to work up this way. It actually feels like it's going down into the bicep a little bit more than it should. Yeah, this here has a lot of, it's hard to explain what it feels like because there's not really any words for it, but it feels like there's like packing bubbles, those little sheets of paper that have little bubbles on them. It feels kind of like that, only not quite as pronounced. And that's a sign that the muscle isn't happy, it's not smooth. You want to have a smooth muscle. And then when you do have stuff like this, you also want to be able to do a lot of cross fiber friction along there, because some of this, especially if there's range of motion interference, the cross fiber will break apart the tissue that's stuck together. Muscle fibers, when you look at them at a subtle level, are supposed to be fine like silk threads. And when they start getting stuck together, then if you run along with it, it's not going to open it up. It has to be cross fiber. So that's something that you'll need to recognize if you're doing massage therapy. Although there's some other things you're going to have to do at a subtle level as well to really open it up. I'm just going to move her arm out a little bit. Is that okay? So now we're going to go into this shoulder, and I'm running. This is like an ironing of the muscles. But when you feel a lot of these bumps, these little packing bubbles in the muscle, you want to go into cross fiber friction, which you go across the fibers. And there's a reason for that, because you want to open them up and you want to get rid of some of that scar tissue that might be in there. Usually that happens in more repetitive motion, but it can happen in other injuries. It's quite tight through here, but I'll be working through that. And then we need to also get underneath the shoulder here and check the range of motion. And up and around. Now this I'm going along with it because now it's smooth. After I did the cross fiber friction, it seemed to work that out. So whatever's going on, it sounded like when Melissa was explaining it to me, it sounded like it was the beginning of a frozen shoulder because of the restriction on the movement of the arm and shoulder. Yeah, this little muscle here is we're going to need some attention. Now here's just some kneading that I'm doing, picking that muscle up and separating it. So it's kind of a picking the muscle up and separating it into the cross fiber activity. And here's, I don't know what you call this one, just the thumbs moving back and forth. It's somewhat cross fiber and somewhat going with the fiber. And it does feel like it's going down about to here. Okay, so when you do some of this work, then to even get a little bit deeper into the structure, I'm checking it up here, hand underneath, to check the trapezius, even though that's not really directly related into the front of the shoulder. It is a antagonist or protagonist, depending on which way you're moving it. It does attach into the scapula, and then indirectly it's going to be going into the socket area with other attachments. So you want to check the whole bunch of muscles because they work with one another. It's a very integrated system. Okay, that all feels better. This feels much different now. Now, with the subtle anatomy, then there's things to do where you're going to be feeling into the, actually melding in to the tissue and waiting for it to move on its own. Once you work it out like that, then you can get into the, where you're pushing the energy with your hands and you're working that, and that's a technique that I'll be teaching in the course, Beyond the Basics. And I'm melded in right now, and I'm feeling a little bit of very subtle movement. There is some unwinding going on. So what it feels like to me is that we've broken up that tension where the muscle was a little bit stuck together, and we've opened that up, and now the tissue is finding its own way. Also, the tissue up here where my lower hand is along the top of the shoulder, that's also interrelating with what's happening on the top of, on the upper hand, more of the shoulder socket area. Yeah, there's a lot of movement here of unwinding. Now, a frozen shoulder is when you can't put your shoulder like behind your back very well, or you can only lift it so far to the side. And if you do it too far, it really hurts, and sometimes it can hurt right down into the upper arm as well. It's not a pleasant thing. There's different techniques to taking care of a frozen shoulder. Although I find in the work I've done for all the years I've been doing it, that the subtle part, without the subtle part of the work, it's not easy to get undone. It takes a long time. And by doing it more subtly, you'll find that the body is doing the work for you, and you're just helping it not to go back into the old pattern by it happening slowly and doing it on its own, and you learn how to follow that tissue. Then the brain can pick up a new muscle memory pattern in the process, and that's how it can hold. That's why people who come in with sciatica, it's a very slow process to straighten out that sacrum, but once it's straightened, it's gone slow enough that they usually hold it in 1, 2, maybe 3 sessions. So it's a very efficient way to approach the body. And this all feels really good. It's a lot of movement. And it's feeling really, really good. The way it's unwinding way up into the neck area. So that could have been what was pulling a little bit on the side on her chin, to pull the chin a little bit off, because it did straighten out when I did the occipital base release. So I'm just getting down to the other muscle, part of the muscle that is affecting that tension on that muscle And she's still unwinding. Okay, it feels like it's pretty well done. Yeah, that feels different than it did. It may need some more work, but it feels very smooth compared to what it did. It doesn't have that bubbly feeling. And I'm just going to pick up her arm a little bit and just check for deeper thing. Moving the body is also very good. Sometimes these kind of things with the shoulders will relate into some kind of emotional thing as well, but that's for another time. Yeah, that feels pretty good. How does that feel to you?
It's great. Amazing.
So, Melissa, noticing a difference, which is good. You always want to have your client feel a difference. And now, again, I'll remind you, the audience, and I'll also remind Melissa that when you have these changes that are at a subtle level, oftentimes the next day it feels a little stiff or sore. And that's because it's reorganizing itself to the proper position. The body will only move towards correction when it's allowed to. It's always some kind of trauma that takes it out. So when you feel that kind of pain, it doesn't necessarily mean that it's going back to being bad. That happens with a lot of healing. A lot of times when you're healing, even in organ function, you're going to find that if you're having pain with that, it's probably a good sign, because oftentimes the disease will move quietly. Not in all cases at all, but I'm saying that that is oftentimes the case in things like muscle work or other corrections of the structure. Particularly that's the case. And that all feels good. It's not swimming like it was. It's feeling like it's just taking the cranial pulse very well. And I can feel the lymph flow coming through it, and it's doing fine. So yeah. So I think we have it. So there we have it, a little shoulder work. She'll be able to go to work now and hopefully not work it too hard at first so we can process. But yeah, that was not a real difficult shoulder pattern to correct. Okay, so I'm going back to the head here just to check, and she's absolutely on plumb line now. Her chin is coming there. Remember before it was over there? Now she's here. So that's what was pulling. It was just a little bit of pull from that little bit of tension. That's why it's important to keep yourself fit and straight, and that way you have a better functioning body. So she's all aligned, ready to go. Thank you so much for watching, and we'll see you next time.
Thank you. That was amazing. Wow. The instant chills.
I want to invite you to explore my course, The Foundations of Subtle Alignment. It is going to take you beyond the work of massage therapy. It will take you into the world of the subtle anatomy. Misalignment of the subtle structures is often the root cause of chronic pain, injuries, and chronically high levels of stress hormones. These techniques offer profound benefit whether you are working on people with complex issues or not. In this course, you will learn about the subtle anatomy and a protocol for assessing and aligning the subtle structures.